Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Here with Martin. Exciting string of videos coming. Today we're going to learn more about Martin, his background, kind of origin stories for context. But going forward, definitely want these to be interactive. We're going to cover a ton of stuff, press releases as they come out, as well as questions that anyone has. So please, if you're watching this and you've got questions about the company, drop it below. We'll make sure we do some Q&A type videos along the way. But first things first, Martin, how are you?
Doing fantastic, Jason. Good to see you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, here, let's dive into it. Usually like to kick off, a bunch of your background, kind of tell me what you were doing before context, so that we'll eventually get to, the origin stories for the company.
Absolutely. So I'm one of those people who's never been able to pick an exact career path. I've always loved business, always loved science. As an undergrad, studied both. And then my career, although oncology has been the common thread throughout, I bounced between business and science. So graduated undergrad, went to New York for grad school, did basic research in oncology at Sloan Kettering, then was recruited to a venture capital fund called Osage University Partners, where I had this great job to scour the country and even some institutions in Canada, like Toronto, University of Toronto and Toronto Sick Kids, great institutions. But I would go interface with these crazy professors who had these amazing ideas, and we would form companies. And so I particularly focused on oncology and rare disease, did this for a number of years, formed some great companies, invested in some great companies, built a great track record at the investment fund. And after 5, 6 or so years of doing that, realized, oh my God, I'm loving this, but I'm doing it for someone else. Why don't I irrationally try to do this for myself? And so left the firm, started Context formally in 2016. Context is a women's oncology company. So again, I started at the bench in oncology research, then investing, and now operating. And women's oncology is near and dear to me. I have breast and ovarian cancer that run in my family. And so I've always wanted to create a company focused on that subsector of oncology. So that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah, wow, interesting. All right, unpacking this a little. Any cool companies, cool investments you could talk about? Don't need names, but like general. That's a wild background, pretty interesting. That you're going, scouring, looking at different companies, and how do you match business and science? Pretty interesting. If you can talk about any of the things you saw.
Yeah, as often happens, you always tend to only talk about the good ones and the good outcomes. But for me, I was always focused on oncology and oncology adjacencies. So we looked at companies and investing in companies like Kura Oncology, which is really at this point, a small molecule kinase specialist. They started with very similar to Context. They took a drug that was in phase 2 development from another pharma and repositioned it. And then they brought in a preclinical high risk, high upside program. And so both of those programs became the anchors to the company. And then in adjacency, so kinases are primarily used for oncology, but it turns out there's some kinases that are really important in your eye. So we invested in a company called Aerie Pharmaceuticals, which was an ophthalmology company, and the Rho kinase pathway, it turns out, is incredibly important for glaucoma. So I spent my days looking at oncology signaling pathways, sometimes for oncology, sometimes for adjacencies. But we invested in great companies. So those two other companies like Immune Design, which was almost like a cell therapy platform for cancer vaccines, Receptos, which ended up being in the multiple sclerosis space. So it was a great run at the fund.
Yeah, I already know we're going to get a ton of questions like, what does Martin look for? And all these, and we'll save that for another video, but I'm sure they're coming.
Yeah, I
And
might need to have a side consultancy around that.
fair enough. Well, I know they're gonna come, and welcome to go through those in a future video for anyone that's made it so far. Back to context. So, very interesting. Hey, why am I doing this for fun? Let me do it myself. Do you want to walk through? So you were looking for something in the space, dear to your heart, runs in your family. Can you go into any more details on kind of how it came about? Just curious.
Yeah, so when I was an investor, and I think going back to current oncology, that's a great example. So you always look for upside and risk mitigation. So Kura, I think, did things in a really smart way. They found a really de-risked pharma asset that they would reposition, and then a really risky but high promise preclinical drug. And so they would blend the two. And so I very much wanted to do exact the same strategy at my company. So we were able to acquire a phase 2 ready oral progesterone receptor antagonist called ONXR from another company. So we, with our seed capital, bought that asset. We own it outright, no milestones, no royalties. And then in 2021, we licensed a bispecific antibody. So a red hot area of development. It's a riskier proposition than our clinical program, just given that it's so early, but one that combines precision medicine with immunotherapy. So tremendous potential, and one that we're really excited about. So if you look at it from an investment standpoint, both programs have tremendous upside. One has much less risk in our phase 2 program, but considerable costs given the stage of development, very late stage, and the preclinical asset, which right now is much more cost effective to develop, but riskier given its stage. So I think we've done a good job of blending and stratifying a pipeline.
Yeah, no, extremely interesting. Really pulling on your background. No, cool. Well, that's a awesome kind of background, that also how kind of context came together. You've already kind of covered it, but I love it in its own segment. Imagine we walked into the 50th floor elevator, and I said, "Hey, tell me a little bit more about context. I've never heard of you guys before. Give me the couple minute elevator pitch."
Absolutely. So we are totally mission driven, and our mission is to advance medicines for female cancers, those being breast, ovarian, endometrial. So these are cancers that have more than likely touched anyone who's watching this video, either directly or indirectly. These are cancers that, if they're caught very, very early and treated with surgery and sometimes radiation or chemotherapy, most women will be cured at that time. The fundamental problem is the funnel by which you diagnose these cancers is massive. 250,000 women are diagnosed with breast cancer each year in the United States alone, and this is a global problem. So even if 5% of those women's cancers come back on a yearly basis, the prevalent population, number of women with these diseases at any given time is massive. When the cancer comes back, it's metastatic. At that point, for these cancers, there's no cure. Women with metastatic breast cancer tend to live about 4 to 5 years. With ovarian cancer, 2 to 3, and endometrial is the most aggressive. Women typically live about 18 months with diagnosis of metastatic disease. We want to change that. So we want to develop drugs that help these women live longer, and we want to give them a high quality of life while they're living longer. So if the woman has a side effect profile that makes them lose their hair, makes it so they are so tired they can't play with their grandkids, that they have no quality of life, no self-worth, no ability to have agency, well, that's not a particularly helpful treatment for them. So we want them to live longer, and we want them to live a long, happy life while they're on our drug. The way we're doing that is building a leading pipeline. Our most advanced drug is called ONXR. It's an oral progesterone receptor antagonist. Progesterone is a mitogen, meaning it stimulates the growth of cancer. The way it functionally does that is really twofold. One, it's the key driver of cancer metastatic spread for breast, ovarian, endometrial cancer. And then secondly, it does a wonderful job of helping the cancer block itself from the immune system. So the immune system can't see the tumor, what we refer to as immunologically cold. So our whole goal with our drug is to block progesterone and progesterone receptor, to prevent these metastases from happening, to turn the tumor from cold to hot so our immune systems can attack it, and then combine our drug with the standard of care, drugs like anti-estrogens, which is the fastest path to regulatory approval. Functionally, to do that, we are running 4 ongoing clinical trials, all in mid-stage clinical development, at premier academic institutions, both in the US and abroad. So that program's going fantastic. The drug's been in, at this point, over 140 patients to date. We're seeing really nice, promising clinical activity and fantastic safety and tolerability thus far. We also have a more nascent but massive potential program in our Claudin-6 bispecific antibody. Bispecifics are antibodies that can bind to two different proteins. We're interested in applying that technology to precision medicine. So we want to have an antibody that binds specifically to a cancer target, and then the other portion of the antibody bind to a cytotoxic T cell, to an immune cell. And by bringing the cancer cell and the immune cell in tight proximity, the immune cell can kill the cancer cell. So that idea has been around for a long time. It's been proven. The hard part is developing an antibody against something that's only expressed in cancer cells. There aren't many cancer proteins that are unique to the cancer and different from normal tissue. Because if you have this precision medicine binding to your heart, for instance, we need our hearts. You can't lose your heart. So what we identified was a protein called Claudin-6. It's what's referred to as an oncofetal protein. It's required for the development of a fetus. And then upon birth, it's transcriptionally repressed. So in normal adult tissue, we don't have Claudin-6, but it is highly present in certain cancers: ovarian, endometrial, lung, gastric, and testicular. So a lot of patients with these cancers, and we have a unique cancer target. So we have a bispecific that binds to Claudin-6. It also has a CD3 engager arm to activate the immune cells. And what we think differentiates our company from competition like BioNTech and Xencor, they're just a little bit ahead of us, is our selectivity. So Claudin-6 looks very similar to Claudin-9 and Claudin-4. Claudin-9 is in our ears and our gut, Claudin-4 in our pancreas. So you don't want to bind to those proteins. To not bind to those proteins is not trivial. And so we think we have currently an antibody that supports a selectivity profile that is better than anything we've seen thus far as it relates to publicly disclosed information. And so we think ultimately that selectivity advantage will provide us a wider therapeutic window. So we'll be able to match the clinical activity that people like BioNTech are seeing without the pancreatic side effects that BioNTech is also seeing, which will be huge for us. So we've got two great programs. To fund them, the company as a whole has raised at this point almost $100 million. In the fourth quarter of 21, we raised $60 million in gross proceeds. We ended 2021 with $50 million of cash in the bank. So we're well financed into 2024 at a time when the market's quite turbulent, where people are worried about growth stocks and cash positions for companies. We're in a really fortunate position where we're long cash. Our programs are funded to the extent they need to be funded to get to all of our inflection points. And so I think we're at a really great place as a company to execute, drive towards our 2022 catalysts, and deliver for our investors.
Yeah. Oh, incredible overview. And we'll definitely dive into a lot of these things you're talking about: inflection points, timelines. We'll talk about these, drugs in further detail. We'll give them their spotlight for sure. But amazing overview. And I think I'm going to get a lot of great questions. And again, always want to invite these questions. We're going to do some great Q&As, going to go into more depth, and let us know if you've got questions, things you want to see us to dive into in a video. We definitely will. But yeah, Martin, thanks. That was an incredible overview. Probably the best elevator pitch, a couple-minute elevator pitch I've ever seen. So thanks so much for that. I'm bringing this video a little bit back to you, just to make it a little bit more personal. Anything else about you wanted to throw in this video that's kind of about you? I know we were doing your background, so I don't know. Some people say their favorite sports. Some people talk a little bit more about other things they do. Completely up to you.
Sure. No, I would say I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And so the question, I always guess I'm a younger guy. And so people always think about like Elizabeth Holmes and all these crazy young people who, when they turned 13, they said, I want to be an entrepreneur. Like when I was 13, I wanted to be a baseball player. And those dreams end and new ones emerge. So I just described them an accidental entrepreneur. I had a great mentorship in venture capital, wonderful mentor in Bill Harrington and Mark Singer. And I caught the bug, started Context. Since then, was fortunate enough with co-founders to start a second company in 2021 called Presidia Biotherapeutics, which is focused on tissue-specific drug delivery. So that company is doing great, well-funded. I'm fortunate to be a board member of that company. And then a third endeavor with Cure Duchenne Ventures. So lost a brother to Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Cure Duchenne is a venture philanthropy. So we make equity investments in biotechs to induce them to develop drugs for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And that $2 million evergreen fund, we've grown to $50+ million, have made some great investments in Sarepta, Bamboo Therapeutics, Exonics, which was a huge return to Vertex. And then we redeploy that capital in the next generation of companies. So I'm an accidental entrepreneur who keeps diving into more and more entrepreneurial activities.
Like you said, you caught the bug. No,
Yeah.
interesting. Well, really interesting mind. You get to see a lot of these opportunities with that VC background, for sure. Probably a very great mix in the biotech space. So, look, I want to say thanks so much for joining. This was a great kind of first video, little intro to Context. Looking forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks so much, Jason.